Imagine getting quite far, achieving a certain level of recognition, but then feeling this really strong pullback to how things were right at the start. That's the kind of fascinating paradox we're diving into today. We're looking at the story of Pilotikattheravatthu Thera, who was a Buddhist monk.
Right.
And after he'd gone through higher ordination, got support from everyone, he kept feeling this urge, this need to go back to his original, very simple cloth.
But what's really interesting here is that this isn't just some anecdote. It comes from ancient Buddhist texts, specifically the Pilotikattheravatthu. We actually have a few different versions of it, which is great because it helps us piece together a fuller picture, both of the monk's own experience and, importantly, the teachings the Buddha drew from it.
Okay, right, let's unpack this then. So the goal with this deep dive is really to explore these themes that Pilotikattheravatthu's story brings up. Things like, personal growth, that tension between wanting things simple versus dealing with more complexity.
Yeah, that push and pull.
And maybe most importantly, how just reflecting on ourselves or really thinking things through can help us sort out our own inner conflicts. For you, the learner, listening in, this offers some ancient wisdom, but applied to very modern challenges, when you say. Things like ambition, contentment, self-discipline.
Absolutely. Timeless stuff.
So where does his story actually start? What were his beginnings like?
Well, it begins very simply. The texts describe him as just a young boy, quite noticeable because he wore basically rags. They call it Pilotikattheravatthu, discarded cloth. And he just had a simple bowl for collecting food. That was his life.
Just rags in a bowl.
And it was like this that he was spotted by the venerable Ananda.
Ah, Ananda, one of the Buddha's main disciples.
Exactly. One of the key figures.
So a chance meeting like that could change everything, can it? What happened when Ananda saw him?
Well, Ananda saw the boy's situation, his simplicity, and maybe sensed something, some potential. He felt compassion and asked him, essentially, have you thought about becoming a monk, taking a step beyond this?
And the boy?
The boy said he would, but he didn't have anyone to actually ordain him, no sponsor. So Ananda just offered, said, I'll do it.
Wow. That's quite something. A huge act of kindness.
Definitely.
What did that look like then, that change?
So Ananda took him to the monastery. The texts say he personally gave him a bath, got him cleaned up, and taught him some fundamental spiritual practices, what they call kamahana, sort of the basics before he was formally ordained.
So a complete life change.
A total turnaround from how he'd been living, yeah.
From rags to robes, quite literally.
Exactly.
Okay, so now he's a monk.
Yeah.
He's in the community, getting support. Where does this conflict come in, this desire to go back?
Right, that's the core of it. So after ordination, he starts receiving plenty of support food, requisites, respect. The texts use the term labasakara.
Okay.
And he's wearing proper monastic robes. He's healthy, described as kulasariro, robust.
Sounds like things were going well externally.
Externally, yes. But internally, he started to feel uneasy. He began questioning if wearing these nice donated robes was really right for him. And this strong feeling, this desire, emerged to go back to his original rag cloth.
Wow. That is quite a reversal. He has, the necessities, the respect of the community, and he's yearning for rags. What do you think was behind that? Was it just the simplicity?
The texts don't spell it out explicitly, but we can sort of infer maybe it was the simplicity, like you say. Or maybe just the familiarity, a connection to a time before the responsibilities and complexities of monastic life.
Could be.
Even with its comforts, maybe that life felt constraining in a way.
It does make you think about our own lives, doesn't it? That occasional urge to simplify, to declutter.
Yeah, that pull towards minimalism or something. So this wasn't just a passing fancy for him then. It sounds like it really took hold.
Oh, definitely. It became a pattern. The story says he kept going back, physically going to the spot where he'd left his old rag cloth and his bowl.
He kept them. Yeah, he'd left them there. And he'd go back and look at them. And apparently he'd have this really intense internal dialogue with himself.
Okay, what was he saying? This sounds crucial.
It is. The texts give us a direct quote, essentially. Hirika nilaja. It goes on, but the gist is, you shameless one, you impudent one, you've given up wearing proper robes, and now you want to put this rag back on and go begging with a bowl like before.
Whoa, that's incredibly harsh self-talk.
It really is. Like he's berating himself for even having the thought.
Did it work? Did shaming himself make the feeling go away?
Here's the interesting part. The text says that as he was admonishing himself, like the phrases attana uvadi, his mind became clear, chitta pasidi.
So the self-criticism led to clarity, not just more guilt.
Apparently so. That moment of intense self-reflection, facing the desire head-on, even negatively, seemed to bring him a kind of sharp focus and, paradoxically, peace.
Huh. So he'd go back to the rags, have this intense internal debate, then what?
Then he'd turn around and go back to the monastery, leaving the rags there again.
Okay.
But, and this is key, it wasn't a one-off. This cycle repeated. The urge would build up after a few days. He'd go back to the rags, have this moment of self-admonishment and clarity, and then return.
Wow, so it was an ongoing battle.
A real internal struggle, yeah.
Yeah.
It highlights the persistence of the feeling.
Must have been exhausting.
Yeah.
Did anyone else notice him doing this?
Yeah.
Going back and forth?
Oh, yes. The other monks definitely noticed him making these regular trips away from the monastery.
What did they think?
They started asking him, where are you off to again?
And what did he say?
He'd tell them he was going to see his teacher, which in a way wasn't entirely untrue, perhaps. He was revisiting something fundamental.
Interesting way to put it. His teacher being the rags or the experience connected to them.
Maybe the whole situation, the internal conflict itself became the teacher. But yeah, this unusual repeated behavior definitely caught the attention of the other monks.
Okay, so this is fascinating. He keeps going back, keeps having this internal struggle focused on the rags. How does that lead to enlightenment? It seems almost counterintuitive.
Right. It does seem strange. But this is where the teaching gets really profound. The text explains that by specifically using his rag cloth as the single point of focus for his contemplation, the term is Pilotikattheravatthu attainment,
Okay.
meaning he directed his mind solely onto it and used that focus to restrain himself, to steady his mind
Yeah.
by doing just that consistently.
Yes.
After a short time, Katipahina Eva, he attained Arhatship, the highest level of enlightenment.
So the very object of his craving, the thing pulling him back, became the key to his liberation.
Exactly. It's an incredible twist.
That's quite something.
It really shows how even difficult urges, things we might see as negative attachments, can actually be transformed.
Yeah.
They can become tools for practice if we approach them with mindfulness and discipline.
So it wasn't about getting rid of the feeling necessarily, but about using it.
Using the energy of it, the focus it provided, the consistency of his self-reflection anchored to this very specific personal symbol that was the path for him.
Okay, so after he attains Arhatship, enlightened, did things change? Did he stop visiting the rags?
Well, the other monks noticed something else. He wasn't going to see his original teacher, presumably Ananda or whoever gave him initial instructions as often anymore.
Ah, okay.
So they asked him about that. Why aren't you visiting the teacher?
And his answer?
His answer was interesting. He said something like, while he had been in association, sati, with his teacher before, that association was now, severed or completed because he'd reached the goal.
He didn't need that kind of guidance anymore.
Right. He'd internalized the process, reached the endpoint through his own unique practice.
That must have sounded pretty cryptic to the other monks. First, he keeps visiting this teacher. Now he says the connection is severed.
Exactly. They were confused, understandably puzzled by what seemed like contradictions.
So what did they do?
They did what monks often did. They went to the Buddha. They reported what Pilotikattheravatthu had said, explaining their confusion.
And the Buddha's reaction. Did he clarify things?
He did. The Buddha confirmed it straight away. Yes, this monk, his son, as he sometimes called disciples, had indeed reached Arhatship.
Ah, validation.
Yes, and he explained it to them. He said basically that his son had initially needed guidance, yes, but now, through his own self-discipline, specifically through this unusual practice focused on the rags, he had purified himself and achieved enlightenment by his own efforts.
What a powerful affirmation of that inner work. And I gather the Buddha didn't stop there. He used this as a teaching moment.
That's right. He then delivered 2 key verses, Gatha, that really crystallized the lessons from Pilotikattheravatthu's journey.
Okay, let's hear them. What's the first one?
The first verse goes, Hiranisdo puriso kochi lukasmi vijati, yunida apaboteti aso badro kasamiva.
Okay. Can you break that down for us? What's the core message there?
Sure. It's essentially praising a very rare kind of person. Evaripo pugalo dulabo, the commentary notes, such a person is rare in the world. This is someone who restrains harmful thoughts, akusala-vitakka, through hiri, which is often translated as a kind of inner shame or moral conscience.
It's like an internal break.
Exactly. Hiri nisto, one who prevents or restrains through hiri, and this person rouses themselves from spiritual sluggishness, from nida or sleepiness, just like a fine, well-bred horse, asabhadro, avoids the whip, kasamiva. It anticipates and responds before the whip even strikes.
So it's about that inner sensitivity and self-control, being aware enough to stop yourself before you go down the wrong path.
Precisely. Having that inner moral compass and the strength to act on it, it highlights how special and, frankly, how rare that quality is.
That makes a lot of sense in light of the monk's story, battling his own urges. What about the second verse?
The second verse is more directive, more of an encouragement to the listeners. It starts, Asuyata badro kasaniviatyata pino savagino bhavata. It's saying, be like that noble horse when it feels the touch of the whip. Be ardent, hatha pino. Be deeply moved or stirred with urgency, savagino.
Okay, so it's urging diligence. And what specific things does it say we should cultivate?
It then lists a whole range of crucial qualities needed to overcome suffering. Dukhamide anapakanti, this suffering which is not insignificant. It mentions faith, saddha, both worldly and transcendent, ethical virtue, sela, specifically the 4 kinds of purity, energy or effort, virya, both physical and mental, concentration, samadhi, referring to the deep meditative states, and importantly, discernment of the Dhamma, Dhamma Vinachayana, understanding cause and effect.
That's a comprehensive list.
It is, and it finishes by mentioning being perfected in knowledge and conduct, sampannavichyakan, and established in mindfulness by Sada. It's basically a roadmap.
Develop these qualities, be diligent like that spurred horse, and you can overcome suffering.
That's the message. Using the monk's very personal, specific struggle as a springboard to teach these universal principles of the path.
And what was the impact of these teachings, this story, and the verses?
Well, the texts conclude by saying that at the end of this discourse, Desanavasan, many people listening attained various stages of spiritual realization, starting with the first stage, Sotapati, or stream entry.
So it clearly resonated very deeply.
Immensely. It shows how powerful a specific, relatable human struggle can be when illuminated by wisdom.
Absolutely. So thinking about this whole deep dive, for you, the learner, what are the big takeaways here from Pilotikattha Thera's experience? It really does underscore the power of looking within, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, first, the sheer power of self-reflection. That moment the monk had facing his desire, even negatively, led to clarity. It's a reminder to really look at our own motivations. Second, the importance of inner discipline, that ability to manage our thoughts, to restrain the unhelpful ones, like the Buddha praised in the first verse. It's not just about external rules.
What, the inner work?
And maybe the most surprising takeaway is how profound progress can emerge from engaging deeply with something seemingly simple, or even something we see as a problem, like his attachment to the rags. Instead of just discarding it, he used it. It makes you wonder, about the simple things in our own lives or the persistent challenges. Maybe there's potential there we're overlooking.
That was a powerful thought. And it leads perfectly into our final question for you to ponder. Could it be that our greatest advancements, our biggest leaps forward, don't always come from searching for more, acquiring new things, but maybe from a much deeper understanding, a mastery of what we already possess, even perhaps those parts of our past or ourselves that we might feel tempted to just discard?
Something definitely worth reflecting on.